Super Smash Bros. Has been one of the most loved Nintendo series in its almost 20 years of existence, and with the newest title, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, giving us, well, the ultimate Smash Bros. Experience, it's time to take a look back at the Nintendo Brawler's long and interesting history. Super Smash Bros. Began development in 1998 by HAL Laboratory, however the original concept didn't initially feature Nintendo characters at all, sporting a working title of Dragon King the fighting game that at the time was comprised of simple polygon stick figures. The late Satoru Iwata expressed to game director Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of Kirby, that fighting games do not often sell well, and he was encouraged to think of ways to make the title more original. Taking this into account, Sakurai went back to the drawing board in order to improve the concept, eventually coming up with the idea of using popular, recognizable Nintendo characters instead that would be easier to sell. However, Sakurai knew that obtaining permission to use Nintendo's beloved characters wouldn't be easy, and decided to go ahead and create a prototype without informing Nintendo themselves until it's something concrete to show. Thankfully, Nintendo were impressed with Sakurai's pitch and much to his relief approved the concept, with full go-ahead to use Nintendo's various licenses and branding. Unlike many fighting games at the time, Smash Bros. Wasn't just unique because of its mashup of Nintendo characters, but also because of its mechanics. Whereas most fighting games were 1v1 bouts consisting of gradually whittling down the other player's health until it reached zero, Smash Bros. Allowed for 4 people to duke it out at one time and was all about knocking the other players off of the stage. In order to do this, you would need to raise your opponent's percentages for attacks, which in turn would make it easier to send them flying. Another aspect that made the game unique was in how easy it was to pick up and play, with no need to remember long, complicated combos that previously made other fighting games feel rather inaccessible for more casual gamers. In the final release, Smash Bros. Featured a fairly healthy roster of 12 characters to pick from, all of them being well known from Nintendo's biggest titles such as Mario, Link, Samus, Donkey Kong and Pikachu. Super Smash Bros. Would go on to release for the Nintendo 64 in 1999 and despite initial concerns would prove to be a resounding success in both Japan and Western markets, selling 1.97 million in Japan and 2.93 million in the US. The game received generally favourable reviews with a Metascore of 79. Praising its addictive multiplayer component while criticising the single player for its lack of longevity and challenge. Following the first success, a sequel was greenlit, and just 2 short years later, the next entry, Melee, would release as one of the first GameCube games. Once again, Sakurai was at the helm of production, and despite him and his team only spending 13 months developing the title, it was a major improvement on all fronts. The most immediate improvement was the graphics, that thanks to the more beefy hardware of the GameCube, were majorly overhauled. In fact, Sakurai wanted to pay homage to the new console by making a CGI intro that would really blow people away, taking 3 separate graphic houses to complete. In terms of the roster, Melee takes a 12 from the original and bumps it up to a total of 25, 26 if you include Sheik as a separate character. Some of the new additions included popular Nintendo characters such as Ganondorf, Bowser, Peach and Mewtwo, whilst also adding in some older, lesser known ones such as Mr. Game & Watch and the Ice Climbers. Stages were also given a nice increase, jumping up from a measly 9 to 29 in Melee. Characters and stages aside, the sequel also addressed the biggest criticism of the first by fleshing out the single player content, giving fans, in addition to the standard classic mode, a side-scrolling adventure mode to sink their teeth into, home run contest, 51 event matches, and tons of trophies to collect and display, each containing a little bit of info on the character or item. Gameplay wise, the game was more responsive, faster paced and balanced, and is still the go-to Smash for competitive players, which is quite remarkable given the game's age. Overall, Melee was a worthy successor and was extremely well received by critics with a Metascore of 92, a substantial increase over the original. Critics praised the sequel for the vastly improved visuals as well as the wealth of content on offer compared to the first. However, some did criticise the game for not being original enough. The game would go on to become the best-selling GameCube title ever with over 7 million copies shipped. Despite the fantastic reception and units sold, it wasn't without cost however, as Sakurai stated his lifestyle during its grueling development was destructive and he felt an immense amount of pressure to deliver a great game. The third title in the series, Brawl, wouldn't arrive for another 7 years, releasing in 2008 for the Nintendo Wii and is somewhat of a divisive game amongst fans, introducing some great features whilst also making some controversial changes. Brawl was announced in the E3 2005 show by Iwata, which took Sakurai by surprise as nobody had spoken to him regarding a new Smash title, although he was formally requested to once again head the project shortly later. However, following a dispute in 2003, HAL Laboratory would not be involved. Instead, Sakurai's team would be made up largely of various members from other studios. Brawl, like Melee, once again ups the roster number, this time going from 26 to 37, yet it also saw for the first time the removal of certain characters. These were Roy, Pichu, Mewtwo, Dr. Mario and young Link, Some of the newcomers who made their Smash debut were Sonic, Meta Knight, Wario, Pit, and even surprisingly, Snake from MGS. The total number of stages were also increased, offering up 41 as opposed to Melee's 29. Graphically, the game was no doubt an improvement over the last, but the art style leaned more towards the realistic side of things with more muted colours that some felt didn't feel quite in line with Nintendo's usual style. Content-wise, the adventure mode was given a story, complete with some really cool CGI cutscenes under the name of Subspace Emissary. While the gameplay and enemies as Subspace Emissary were a little bland, the cutscenes were fantastic fan service and well worth spending the time to unlock. In addition to the story, a stage builder was introduced as well as online play, but the former felt a little basic and the latter was plagued with lag issues. In terms of the gameplay itself, it feels slightly slower than Melee's. This is at least in part due to Sakurai wanting the game to be more accessible. By far the biggest controversial change to Brawl though was in the form of tripping, where your character could randomly stumble, often frustrating players. Brawl on the other hand did introduce one great mechanic in the form of final smashes, special moves that can be acquired by each character, allowing them to unleash a unique powerful attack on other players. Even though the third installment is seen as one of the lesser games in the series overall, especially when compared to Melee, it actually holds a ever so slightly higher metascore at 93, and currently sits as the 8th best-selling Wii game of all time with 13.29 million copies sold. The next entry would also be another long wait, but it was special for a couple of reasons. Super Smash Bros. 4 released on both the Wii U and 3DS in 2014, and was not only the first time the series had been in HD, but also the first time it had graced a handheld console, being jointly developed by Bandai Namco and Sakurai. While both were essentially the same game at their core, there were some notable differences outside of the graphics and performance. For example, certain stages and modes would be exclusive to each version, with 8 player bouts possible at one time on the Wii U. Collectibles also differed, with trophies being based around handheld games on the 3DS, while on the Wii U counterpart, they were based more on console Nintendo games. Each sported the exact same roster with a total number of 51, or 58 include the later additions of DLC characters. Some of the biggest new additions were Little Mac, Shulk, Mega Man, and Greninja. Additionally, characters that were previously changeable mid-match were now their own separate fighters, such as Sheik and Zero Suit Samus. Certain characters were once again omitted, the most notable being the Ice Climbers, who were originally intended to be in the roster, but had issues with getting the duo to work on the 3DS and were removed entirely. In terms of the gameplay itself, the game was further balanced to make for a more competitive experience, and this time featured an online component with far fewer issues. Both versions were received well, with the 3DS variant garnering a metascore of 85, while the Wii U version sat slightly higher in 92. Due to the much higher install base, the 3DS version sold significantly more, with 9.35 million copies sold, while the Wii U version sold 5.35 million, becoming the fastest selling game on the platform. Finally, that leads us to the latest entry, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Nintendo Switch. The Like 4 was developed by Sakurai and Namco Bandai. Incredibly, Ultimate has 74 fighters, the biggest in the series ever. Whereas past games have removed characters, this entry brings back every single one that's ever been in the series, as well as adds 11 new ones, such as long requested characters Ridley and King K. Rool. While not every single stage returns, there are also a staggering amount of them, coming in at a total of 103, with each having a competitive version and the ability to morph between different stages during matches. While the game introduces a few new modes, the most intriguing of them all is World of Light, a mode similar to Brawl's Subspace Emissary, providing a unique story with fantastic looking cutscenes, a world to navigate, and spirits to unlock. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the most balanced, content-filled, and graphically impressive Smash Bros. To date, and it's clear that despite 20 years of working on the series, Sakurai's devotion and hard work towards it is still just as strong today as it was when it first began. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to receive notifications when future videos are posted. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.